The atmosphere in the business class lounge at Heathrow International Airport was filled with the familiar bustle. Businessmen hurriedly checked their emails, wealthy families chatted, while celebrities tried to enjoy some privacy before the long flight. David Beckham walked in, wearing a simple but stylish suit, his demeanor calm and attractive. As usual, his appearance immediately attracted attention. Some passengers recognized him, whispering with excitement, but Beckham just nodded politely, heading towards the check-in counter. A flight attendant quickly recognized the famous footballer and approached, smiling professionally, but not hiding his excitement. "Hello, Mr. Beckham. We are very honored to have you on our flight today. We have arranged for you a special seat in first class with the best service." Beckham nodded his thanks, but his eyes suddenly stopped when he noticed a strange scene at the corner of the check-in counter. A black man, dressed smartly in a gray suit, was arguing with another staff member. His voice was low but firm. "I booked first class many weeks ago. This is my ticket. Why is there a problem?" The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with blonde hair tied up in a bun, looked at the man with cold eyes. Her voice was calm but full of meaning. "Sorry, but there is a slight change. We need that seat for another passenger. You will be moved to business class, which is still very comfortable." The man was stunned, looking at the ticket in his hand. He tried to keep his composure. "I paid in full for first class. This isn't a matter of empty seats, is it?" The receptionist didn't answer right away, but her forced smile and averted gaze said it all. The surrounding passengers looked at each other. Some shook their heads slightly, but no one said anything. Beckham tightened his grip on his bag, a feeling of unease rising in his heart. He had seen too many injustices in his life, but this, right before his eyes, in the middle of a large airport, in the middle of the 21st century, still left him in disbelief. Taking a deep breath, Beckham walked up to the counter, stood right next to the black man, and turned to the female staff with a cold gaze. His voice was low but powerful. "What's going on here?" The receptionist was slightly startled. She clearly hadn't expected Beckham to interfere in this matter. Seeing the world-famous soccer star standing in front of her, she immediately changed her attitude, trying to force out a professional smile. "Oh, it's no problem, Mr. Beckham. It's just a small change in the seating arrangement." Beckham crossed his arms, his gaze unwavering. Change in what direction? He booked a first-class ticket. Why was he downgraded to business? The black man turned to look at Beckham, his eyes surprised but also a little hopeful. This was the first time someone had spoken up for him in this situation. The receptionist was at a loss. She looked around as if looking for some kind of support, but no one could save the situation. Finally, her voice gradually lowered. "We just want to ensure the comfort of all passengers." Beckham smiled faintly, his sharp eyes looking straight at her. He had heard this kind of thing too many times, a fancy way of justifying discrimination. He looked at the man and nodded politely. "You booked first class. You deserve to sit in first class. If they don't let you sit there, I have no reason to accept their offer." Then Beckham turned to the receptionist, his voice calm but firm. "Cancel my first class. I'll sit in economy." The entire check-in area suddenly fell silent. The receptionist paled, not expecting a superstar of Beckham's caliber to refuse the privilege for a stranger. Some people who witnessed the situation began to whisper. Some took out their phones to record it. But Beckham didn't care. He took his ticket and walked through the security check without saying another word. The black man stood still for a moment, then smiled gratefully. Beckham walked down the aisle of the business class cabin, his eyes scanning the spacious, luxurious seats designed for the most prestigious passengers. The soft yellow light fell on the sparkling crystal glasses on the table, a sharp contrast to the heavy feeling that enveloped him. He could not forget the helpless look of the man who had been denied his legitimate rights because of the color of his skin. Beckham walked towards the economy cabin, where the black man had been reluctantly assigned a seat. The passenger looked up when Beckham approached, a look of surprise and disbelief on his face. "Do you mind if I sit next to you?" Beckham chuckled, his voice calm but warm. The man paused for a moment, then nodded, a smile flickering across his lips. Of course not. Beckham sat down and fastened his seatbelt, but his mind was still on what had just happened. It wasn't the first time he had witnessed social injustice, but the fact that it was happening so blatantly right in front of him, in an environment where professionalism and fairness should have been paramount, made him feel more indignant than ever. The chief steward, who had earlier offered Beckham a first-class seat, approached him with a worried expression. "Mr. Beckham, we are truly sorry for the inconvenience. If you change your mind, we can still arrange a better seat for you." Beckham looked up, his eyes cold but without saying another word. The stewardess understood that she couldn't convince him, so she quietly left. The plane gradually took off, leaving the bustling Heathrow airport behind. The cabin was quiet as the lights went out, and everyone began to relax, preparing for the long flight. Beckham turned to the man sitting next to him and said softly, "I'm David. Nice to meet you." The man laughed, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I know who you are. I'm Marcus." They began to chat, small talk at first, but it quickly turned to deeper topics. Marcus was a New York entrepreneur who had worked tirelessly to build a tech startup. This trip was a great opportunity for him, but the way he was being treated made him feel disrespected despite all he had achieved. "This isn't the first time this has happened to me," Marcus sighed, "but I never thought someone like you would stand up for me. Most people would just stay silent." Beckham shook his head. "I can't pretend I don't see it. Justice is something everyone deserves." Marcus smiled, but his eyes were still filled with sadness. "But do you think anything can be changed? This has been going on for decades." Beckham was silent for a moment, then took out his phone and sent a text message. Marcus didn't ask, but he could sense something was happening. The plane landed at John F. Kennedy International Airport in the bright lights of New York City. Passengers were disembarking one by one, but the atmosphere still lingered with the aftermath of the event that had just taken place. Beckham and Marcus stepped out of the economy class cabin and strode down the long corridor leading to the baggage claim area. As soon as they stepped out of the arrivals gate, they quickly noticed the unusual bustle. A group of reporters and journalists had gathered, cameras flashing continuously, flashbulbs flashing like a shower of light surrounding them. Beckham wasn't surprised. He knew that what had happened on the flight had gone far beyond the cabin. It had become a viral story. Marcus paused, not used to the sudden attention. But Beckham remained calm. He gently placed his hand on Marcus's shoulder, signaling that there was nothing to worry about. A reporter stepped forward, his voice eager. "Mr. Beckham, did you refuse a first-class seat in protest against discrimination on the flight?" Beckham paused, looking straight into the camera. His voice was warm, but firm. "I wouldn't call it a protest, I'd simply call it a choice. I believe that everyone, regardless of background or skin color, deserves to be treated fairly. A first-class seat is not as important as protecting human dignity." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Another reporter continued to ask, "Do you think your actions will make a real impact?" Beckham smiled slightly, but his eyes shone with determination. "Every big change starts with small actions. If I don't speak up today, tomorrow there will be more people who are treated unfairly without anyone to protect them. I just did what anyone should do." Marcus looked at Beckham, an indescribable emotion welling up in his heart. From a stranger, Beckham had become a companion, someone who was willing to stand up for him without asking for anything in return. Less than a day later, the airline issued an official statement to the media. "We sincerely apologize for the unfortunate experience of a passenger on yesterday's flight. We are committed to conducting a thorough investigation and taking appropriate measures to ensure that all passengers are served with absolute respect." Not stopping at an apology, the airline also announced that it would reform its employee training process, emphasizing the values of equality and respect for customers. The incident quickly went viral. The hashtag #JusticeWithBeckham trended on Twitter, with millions of people expressing their admiration for Beckham's actions. Many shared similar stories they had experienced, creating a strong wave of demand for airlines to improve their service and attitude. A few days later, Marcus received a call from one of the potential partners he planned to meet on this trip. But instead of discussing the upcoming deal, the partner opened with a surprising sentence. "I read about your story in the newspaper. I was impressed with the way you stood your ground. We need people like you in this industry." Marcus smiled, feeling a real glimmer of hope for the first time in days. Not just a successful deal, but also a recognition of his worth. As for Beckham, after completing his schedule in New York, he quietly returned to his normal life. But his actions were not forgotten. It became a testament to the fact that a person, famous or ordinary, can create change when daring to speak up. In an interview a few weeks later, when asked about the incident on the flight, Beckham simply replied, "Fairness is not a privilege. It is a right that we all deserve." The story of David Beckham on the flight is not just a single event, but also a clear testament to the courage and integrity of a person who dares to speak up against injustice. Beckham's actions were not too noisy or ostentatious, but brought a strong message. In society, injustice still exists, but if just one person dares to stand up, everything can change. Beckham's actions reflect the spirit of an influential person who is not blinded by fame. He not only protects the rights of an individual, but also indirectly fights for fairness and equality in society. This story touches the hearts of many people because it reflects a reality that still exists: discrimination based on prejudice. Beckham's actions not only helped the black man regain his legitimate rights, but also make the whole system reconsider its treatment. It proves that sometimes just a small action can create a big wave of change, especially when it comes from sincerity and kindness. Fairness is not a privilege, but a right for everyone. Beckham's last words summarize an important truth. No matter what position in society, people deserve to be treated fairly and with respect. It is everyone's responsibility to stand up to injustice. If Beckham had chosen to remain silent like everyone else, injustice would have continued unnoticed. Only when someone dares to speak up can change begin. Even small actions can make a big difference. Beckham didn't have to do anything too big. He simply refused to enjoy privileges when others were treated unfairly. But that created a powerful effect, spreading justice to more people. Change starts with the attitude and actions of each individual. Not everyone has the reputation of Beckham, but anyone can speak up when witnessing something wrong. As long as everyone dares to fight for what is right, the world will gradually become better. Beckham's story is a meaningful lesson about compassion, integrity, and the spirit of fighting for justice. It encourages each of us to not only live for ourselves, but also to care for and protect those around us, especially when they are treated unfairly.